you want to go, I'm cool with that. So
okay. Hey friends, welcome to today's webinar. Super excited that you are here. It's going to be a great day. We are tackling hiring healthy long-term team members for your church. I've been looking forward to this for a while, and we know that our teams are a critically important piece of what happens at our church. It's the largest investment typically that a church is spending, and it has the most impact on your culture. We want to say welcome. We're glad you're here. If you are in the chat, we'd love for you to go over there, say hi, let us know where you're coming from. It's always fun to let people know. I'm actually, you might not know this, I live north of Toronto. I'm in Canada, and it is snowing outside today, which it's like stereotypical Canadian weather right now, minus who knows whatever, and snowing, which is not great. You can see I got a sweater on and all this. Matt, you're in Orlando, right outside Orlando?
I'm in Orlando, and I am wearing stereotypical shorts and the short sleeve shirt. It's a little chilly. It's 67 today, so we're just kind of suffering for Jesus.
Nice, that's great. It's a good it's a good day. That's Orlando. What a nice place. What a nice part of the world to live in. So we got a couple friends starting to log in here. We've got Bristol, Tennessee. We got Langley, BC. Some other Canadians. Edmonton. Now that Edmonton. Kendra, you get real winter. When people think we get winter, they'll get like minus 40 there on like a Tuesday afternoon, and they'll go out for a walk. Like, it's crazy how cold it is there. Ryan from Ohio. We got Hans from Alexandria, Minnesota. Malia. Oh, Malia's fantastic, from a church connection church. Fantastic. Mary. Rochester, New York, people from all over the place, which is great. We've got about 100 people signed up for today. We're super excited for, see, look at that. It was minus 40 last week. Guess what Kendra's saying? That's cold. It doesn't matter whether that's Celsius or Fahrenheit. Minus 40 is just cold. Jeremy from Corona, an unfortunate place, to have that name, here, I have a friend of mine that lives in Corona as well, and it's like a funny place to to be from. If you're as you're logging in today, we're talking about today hiring healthy long-term team members for your church. And the thing I'm excited about is the long-term team members, the healthy long-term piece. I want to lean in. I have frankly got some pain in this area. Over the years, have hired some people who just didn't last long term, and we all know there's like the financial side of that. That's an issue, but frankly, the hit to the church is a bigger deal. Even in a large church, like the relational loss is a big deal. The what it does to kind of the culture, and then we're back into finding people, and so we want to help you avoid some of that pain today. Leslie from Lawrenceville, Georgia, another great place. Roger from Stouffville, Ontario. That's actually pretty close to me. Which is I'm in Aurelia there, Roger. So I'm a little bit farther north than you, but in that.
Sorry, I'm
what's
sorry.
that?
I used to live in I used to live in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Yeah, back in the day.
Okay, nice. That's cool.
Yeah.
When was that? When did you live there?
Lord, that was 98 to 2001.
Okay, nice.
I interned at what's called 12 Stone now, but it was back in the day. It was Crossroads. So
right,
that was a fun season, man. That was
nice.
That was
Very cool.
So, hey, Leslie.
Yeah, that's good. Well, why don't we jump in? Hey, friends, my name is Rich. I'm the founder of Unseminary, and I'm just so honored that you've taken some time out today. We do these webinars occasionally on like super important topics, things that we want to help you dig in on. The way today's going to work is we've got Matt Steen from chemistry staffing here. We've got a bit of a conversation we're going to go through, but we want this to be interactive. So the reason why we're doing this live is because we want you to ask your questions. So you can do that in the chat. Just make sure you ask them, and we'll all kind of track as we go, and we'll have questions at the end. Also, I want you to stay tuned till the very end, because we've got a killer resource. I was talking with Matt before. This is one of those resources. It's like he's giving away a part of his business. He's like, here you go. Just go use this thing, which is amazing. So he's a little silly to give it away to you, but he agreed to do today. So stick till the very end so that you can pick that up. Matt, why don't we start with you kind of introducing yourself, give us a bit of your background, a bit of your story, and specifically, why are you so passionate on this whole area of long-term team members? Why is that so important to you?
Yeah, thanks, Rich. So I've spent about 20 years serving churches, right? I spent time, I was a youth pastor for a while, started out in Lawrenceville back in the day. Been up in the New York City area, but also planted a church in Baltimore, served as an executive pastor in a few different churches. And so, I never really woke up one day saying, I want to go into staffing, right? I never really said I want to be a headhunter or anything like that. Really for me, and this is true for my co-founder, Todd Rhodes, we're just church geeks. We just love the local church. And really, chemistry started. I mean, we launched as a company 4 years ago, but this really started as a conversation probably about 5 or 6 years ago, where we're just saying, looking at the state of the local church, and it's like, how do we help churches get healthier, right? How do we help churches, begin to really thrive? And for us, I mean, chemistry really is, it's a staffing company, but more than that, we really want to see churches get healthy. And so for us, staffing was the low-hanging fruit for this, right?
Right.
Because if you think about it, you look at the landscape, most pastors are staying in place for 3.5 years.
Yep.
And that's just not healthy. I mean, you think about that. Right. You think about how much turnover that is. And really, I mean, we've both been in the church long enough. Yep. It's really that 5-year mark where pastors start to hit their stride, right?
Totally.
You go through the honeymoon where you can do no wrong, and that typically means wrong, right?
Yes, so true.
And then you go through, it's like, ministry puberty, right? Where you go through that gawky adolescence where you're just trying to figure out how your body works and offending people inadvertently, and people are just kind of looking at you nuts and not sure whether to trust you or not. And then somewhere around year 4, 4.5, year 5 is where people start to say, hey, he's going to be around here a little longer. This is something we can trust, right? And that's when people begin to follow. And that's really when that fruitful ministry starts to take place. And we're just like, how do we get pastors to that 5-year mark? And so that's really why we launched chemistry. That's right. Really what drove us to do it, and so we figured, if we can do this low-hanging fruit piece, that's going to help churches get healthy. And so really for us, and this is more than you're asking for, but oh well.
There's extra value.
It's extra value. That's right. So there's 3 things that drive us here, right?
Sure.
There's 3 things that we wanted to do. We wanted to help, strengthen both the local churches that we work with, but also the capital C church by, one, we wanted to get churches to find that long-term healthy fit. And we define long-term as 5 years, right?
Right.
Second thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to make the candidate process not be so like soul-sucking and dehumanizing.
Sure. Yes.
Can I say that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Most people, they know how brutal of the search process is.
Yeah.
And so we figured, we built this in where it's like, everybody that gets a rejection letter from us, and we don't call them rejection letters. That sounds harsh, but if we don't have a role for them, if it's not going to be a good fit, we offer them the opportunity to talk to somebody on our team.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, this is incredible.
Tell us about your search. Tell us how how can we pray for you? That kind of thing. But we also, we respond to all the emails that get sent to us.
What a crazy idea.
And it's like, I get churches are busy. I get why this stuff happens. Yeah. But we figured, if we can make the process a little less brutal on candidates, that's a lot less healing that they have to go through once they land a place, whether we place them or not. So that's the second thing that we wanted to do. And then really the third thing that we wanted to do to help churches get healthy was we wanted to provide an alternative income stream for pastors.
Okay. Yep.
So a lot of our process is built on a series of interviews where we'll do 3 interviews with 4 different people. Everybody that does an interview for us is currently serving in a local church or recently retired, right? Yep. So they're pastors, they get ministry, but what we're able to do is kind of take some of the financial burden of going into, ministry off of them, help them, pay for Christmas vacation, that kind of thing. Yep. But that strength, we're convinced that strengthens their church as well. So that's really kind of what got us drawn into this, and that's probably a lot more than you asked for.
No, that's great. I know when we first started, it's been an honor to have you as a sponsor at Unseminary, and back when we were talking about potentially you coming on, those 2 things at the end that you mentioned were the things that jumped out to me. Where I'm like, man, we've known each other a little bit, and I've been aware of chemistry, but as I've got to know you and your process, you and Todd, more, the thing I've been super impressed, 2 of the things I've been super impressed with is that that support you provide for candidates who don't make it, or whatever the right language is there. My brother-in-law actually just went through a 7-month job hunt where he had lost his previous, just not ministry, but had lost his previous job and finally got placed, which was amazing. But that's just like gut wrenching, right? It's just like, it's really tough. And then that whole idea of I like that you're phrasing it like, hey, we're trying to help pastors with alternative income. That's, I think, great. But I think more from a search point of view, the fact that your system is built on practitioners who are currently serving or recently retired, that's incredible. Like that gives us such a leg up. It's not, it's not a bunch of consultants and, somewhere just sitting on phones. It's like, no, these people actually serve in the local church. Well, today, so for friends who are listening in, you've heard a little bit of Matt, his background. This isn't really a big sales process. What Matt wanted to do is get a chance to really help you understand more about the hiring process and what we can apply to your church. And he's even going to offer to jump on the phone and help you in that as well. Stay tuned for more information. You've helped so many churches place so many amazing team members. I know that you end up in these conversations and you've got some go-to advice that you give churches. I'm sure you have things you find yourself repeating all the time, really particularly to avoid hiring short-term team members. What would be some of those potholes? Let's just jump right into it. Potholes that you want, that you find yourself saying to church leaders all the time, hey, we got to avoid these.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give you a big picture answer to this first, and then I'm gonna kind of dive into the biggest thing that we see churches doing. And if I could stop churches from doing this would be awesome, right? Yep. So what we started to do when we started having this conversation about what works and what doesn't work in churches, Todd and I put our heads together, kind of looked at what's true about long-term healthy fits. And for us, there's really 5 things, right? We call them the 5 key factors of a long-term healthy fit. Okay.
I'm taking notes here, Matt. Write it down.
So the first thing is theological alignment, right?
Okay.
We want to make sure that we're not sending Wesleyans to like a PCA church or something like that. We want to make sure on closed-fisted issues that there's a lot that people agree, and then on open-handed theological issues that you're not going to annoy each other, right? That you're not going to drive each other crazy because of how passionate you are about this open-handed issue. So that's the first piece of this, right? The second thing that we look for is we look for cultural competence. Okay. Now, what do I mean by that? 2 things. One, there's always the geographical culture that goes into, what's the culture of the area that you're located in, If somebody, is looking to be north of Toronto, are they okay with the fact that it's going to snow over your head?
Sure. Yes.
Dig out, that kind of thing, right? That's one piece. The more important piece for us, though, is the type of church culture they've worked in, right? So are they coming out of a highly entrepreneurial church where it's just like go make decisions on the fly, or are they going into like a 150-year-old Congregational Baptist church where every decision is made by committee and it takes about 90 days to decide, whether to change out a light bulb? God can do whatever God wants to do.
Yeah, right.
But, chances are that there's going to be some of this going on really early in the process, and it doesn't bode well for the future. So we're looking at the type of church culture that people are coming out of. Third thing that we look for is just the personality fit. Is this a personality that's going to fit in well with our staff? Is this a personality that's going to fit in with our church culture, within our leadership team, all of that? There's personalities, there's great people, but their personality is going to drive you crazy, and that's never going to work. So that's the third thing we're looking at. Okay. Fourth thing, skill set. That's a no-brainer. Can they do the job? Have they been trained well? Can they step into it? Okay. And then the 5th piece is really the chemistry piece. Is this somebody that for the next 5 years you actually want to serve with?
Do you like them?
Do you like them? Is this somebody you're going to have over to your house for barbecue on Tuesday night? Is it somebody you want sitting by your bedside? Right. And so what we tell churches and what we've found is that a lot of times, and I know it's nobody listening to this, so I guess, this is a waste of your 5 minutes or whatever, but what most churches do is they focus first on skill set and then chemistry. Okay.
Yeah.
The resume they get, and they look and, oh, there's a cool church. Yeah, I've heard of that church. and they've done this, and there's cool numbers on there. And so, yeah, they can do this job.
They could do this. Yeah.
And then you get into an interview and you start to laugh at their jokes. And that's the kiss of death, right? Because you start to laugh at their jokes. You start to think, you know what? I really like this guy. Right? And you get deeper and deeper and deeper into process. And in the back of your head, it's like, well, we're Wesleyan, but he's coming out of a Reformed Presbyterian background, but that'll work.
We can make that work.
We can make that work. That's not a big deal. And then it's like, he hasn't really worked in a church like us, but that's fine. We'll make it.
That's fascinating.
He's really going to fit in with the chemistry of the team. And what we found is that, we look at it because, I've been through seminary, and so you have to have a stool analogy. We look at this, as like a 4-legged stool, right?
Okay.
Each of those pieces are one of the legs, and then the chemistry is the seat. If you don't have the chemistry, it's going to be uncomfortable. But you remove one of those legs, and the whole thing falls apart. And so the big pothole that I really, really encourage churches to avoid is, quit focusing skill set first, and then chemistry, right? Dive into theology. We all like to say, theology's not as, theology's important, but, and we try to have those conversations. It's like, it'll still work. And we like to be able to get it. But, 18 months in, it becomes an issue, and it becomes an underlying frustration. So
have you found any of those 4 that seem to be the sticking process commonly? Is it theological or the cultural stuff or personality? Are there any of those or the skill set thing that just seems to be a common sticking point that comes up? Obviously, I appreciate that they're all 4 are important, but is there any that kind of stick out?
I think the two that really surprise people is the cultural piece and the theological alignment piece. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
So, let me tell you a little bit about my story. I went from a church, a church that was really growing quickly. Okay.
Yep.
It was Crossroads 12 Stone, right? Yep. Went from there, it was probably about 2000 or so when I left, very entrepreneurial, very hard charging type A, take the hill, let's go, and that's the type of environment that I thrive in. Right.
Yep.
To a Bible church in Northern Jersey, which great church, great people, was a little slower paced and was a little bit different in their theological assumptions. Okay. And we assumed, because I looked good on paper, was at a great church, and they'll laugh at my jokes. We figured we could make this work. And, it was okay, but it wasn't the best fit. I was there for just about 5 years. Had great ministry, saw some incredible things going, but long term, honestly, it just wasn't the right fit, because theologically, I was more coming out of a more Wesleyan tradition. A little bit more. They were leaning a little way more reformed, and that's a bigger deal than a lot of times we like to admit for some churches.
Sure.
And then the other piece was it was not the entrepreneurial type of a church that I was coming out of.
Sure.
And those two things. The other piece, a lot of times, and this played out in that situation too. A lot of times people think, oh, they're at this big church, they can step down and they're going to grow our ministry. It's going to be fun. Right? Of course, I can go, they can go from a church of 4,000 to a church of 500, right?
I've made this mistake. Yeah.
It sounds great, and some people can do it, right? God can do it.
God can do whatever he can. Yeah.
But you need more of a generalist in that smaller church, because a lot of times you have people that are really super focused, especially in worship roles at that larger church, that they need to have a special skill set, and they need to have a hunger to be at that small church and do a lot more of the hands-on stuff than what they probably are used to doing in the larger environment.
Yeah. Okay, so this is super. It's so funny. There are a couple pain points there. One of the things I've said for years when I'm interviewing people is, and I've coached other people, and maybe I was doing the wrong thing, was I've often said, if you can get them laughing very early, that can put everybody at ease, and hopefully, kind of unearth who they really are. But I know you weren't actually saying don't get people laughing, but it's the other way around. It's interesting. But so, question here. So, I think there can be a forest and trees issue when we try to understand our own church culture. Like trying to understand the uniqueness of our own church it can be hard because maybe we've been on staff a long time, or maybe we're like an elder at the church, or we're on the board or something like that. And it's like, it's all we know. When you're recruiting team members to go into a new church, how do you learn about the uniqueness of that church? I'm thinking particularly, how could we apply that to our own process to kind of unearth what are some of those areas that we should be a little more self-aware of as we're out interviewing people? What do you do in your process to kind of learn about that uniqueness?
Yeah. So one thing to know about us is we're primarily a virtual search firm, right?
Right.
Majority of our searches, we will never step foot on the church's property.
Okay. Yep.
And we offer that to churches. We've had one take it up, and I'm trying not to go through therapy for the rejection for the rest of them.
Sure.
But so much of what we do is virtual on this. And what we do is we take our churches through this onboarding process that most of them just hate. I mean, it's a lot of work, Sure. It's tell us the history of the church and talk to us about, what are the biggest wins, but what are the biggest failures that you guys have had in the last 5 years. Talk to us about who you're trying to reach. Talk to us about what, and this is a bad marketing word for some people in the church space. Who's your target demographic? Are you trying to reach church people? Which is fine,
sure.
But choose a lane and go, right? Or are you more of an attractional model? What is it? And so we'll take people through just a series of questions that really annoys them. But what we hear is that, because so many people are so deep in the culture and get their church, that they just need somebody from outside to really walk through that. Right.
Yeah, that's good.
So much of our process is doing that. And you can have a pastor friend from outside your church kind of guide you through a series of questions about where you are, theologically and what the history of the church is and that kind of thing. Or have somebody take you through a strategic planning process so you have some clarity on where you are. That's all. That's incredibly helpful. But we'll do that. But then we also we rely heavily on an assessment process where we're assessing theology, culture, personality, and skill set, right? Those four big things. And so we take churches through that process as well. What I encourage churches that aren't working with us to do, if you're doing this on your own, is really kind of sit down and start to do some of this legwork as much as you can with as much clarity as you can. And I would really reach out to to a pastor who owes you a favor and encourage them to come in and just kind of take you through a battery of questions about.
Oh, that's a good insight. Yeah, that's a good insight. Yeah,
somebody who gets church.
Yep. A trusted outsider, right? Somebody who's an outsider who kind of can look in a little bit and give you some thoughts. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
There's always that person in your sphere that asks good questions, and you hate talking to them because they ask good questions.
Sure.
Bring them into it.
Yeah, totally. That's great. Well, friends, this has been a great conversation so far. We've got a couple questions that have come in. We'd love for you to ask questions. Remember, just go over to the chat, drop those in there. We'll get a chance to get to those in a little bit. I know, so getting a little bit personal here, I know what the hires that I've made. I'm admitting a bit of my own weakness here, Matt. So just be tender with my heart. With the hires that I've made, it feels like you don't really get to know the person who you're getting till they're like with you for 3 months. It's like, and I've even said in some contexts, it doesn't really feel like the interview process is over until they're really with you for, multiple months. Is there anything we can do in the hiring process to gain more confidence about the team members we're adding to our team? What am I missing that I find myself kind of punting down the road and saying, well, we'll kind of roll the dice and see what happens. Yeah. What can we do to do that?
Yeah, a couple things. Here's what I'd tell you to do. One of the values that I think we bring to a church, our conversations, our interviews are way less formal than most, right?
Sure.
A lot of times in this process, it always feels like the perpetual first date. Right? Everybody's on their best behavior. You're on your best behavior because you really like this guy and you want him to come work for you. The candidate's on their best behavior because it's almost always marketing, right?
Sure.
So one of the things that you really need to try to do is how do you break down that barrier? How do you get by that? For us, we got pastors that are just talking shop, and it's amazing people share on that, right? So you want to get through that. So I would encourage churches, figure out how do you make it less stuffy, less about marketing each other. How do you make it more conversational through the process? There's always going to be that time where you need to do the grilling session where it's like 7 people asking theological questions and everybody hates it. But there's going to be the part where you have to have that. But at the same time, you can have you can make this more personal. And the beauty of this is if the apocalypse here has confirmed anything, it's like we can do a lot through Zoom.
Right.
So much of our process was based off of Zoom. But what that allows you to do is to slow down the process while still going fast, right? Because Zoom is cheap and you can record on Zoom, right?
Right.
And you're able to have more conversations, and it's okay to have 3, 4, maybe even 5 conversations on Zoom.
Right.
You can use the Zoom window to see what's going on in their life. If you look over their right shoulder, sometimes you can see how many days worth of dishes are stacked up. That's usually, and kind of get sense of what's going on.
Yes. Yeah.
Mostly they feel a little bit less formal, and so you can tell the T-shirt that somebody's wearing, that kind of thing. It tells you a great deal.
Yeah, totally.
About that. And so I would lean into Zoom. I would use the record feature of Zoom and share. Instead of doing 3, 4, 5 people on a Zoom call, maybe you have 1 or 2. And it's just, you try to keep it conversational. You record, you share that with the rest of your team, so you know what to drill down into in the next conversation. Okay.
Yeah, you could collect questions from those 3 or 4 other people and say, hey, we'll only have a couple people actually do it. Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that.
You start to see them in a more natural piece. Here's the other thing.
Yep.
Way too many churches are relying on like one candidate weekend to make all the decisions. Okay.
Oh, that's so good. So true. Yep.
So I try to encourage churches, at least do 2 trips, right? Have them on site twice. The first one is under the radar as much as you can do that in a church. Just saying. But you do it under the radar. You don't necessarily make the big production and all that, put them in the fishbowl, but let them have the low key conversations, do a lot of meals, do a lot of kind of walking around, that kind of stuff. Build space into that trip for them to get a sense of the area too, right?
Yes.
Build space. I call it cry time, because the spouse is always going to cry about leaving their friends, leaving their family,
yes,
and all that kind of stuff, new schools, all that. So build that time so they can process together while they're on site.
Yep.
And leave some time just to linger and have conversations. So much of, I think, I don't know if it's Lencioni or who, you hear these conversations about people making decisions on whether to hire somebody based on how they treat wait staff at a restaurant, right?
Right. So true. Yeah.
And so, build in the walking trips and all that kind of stuff to be able to get a sense if there's a potential, potential vibe there. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I love the encouragement to think a little bit outside the box. Don't get forced into like, hey, this is the way. Like, maybe do you think a little bit creatively? I had a mentor, a friend of mine, who part of his hiring process was he would say at the end of the interview, I insisted that I walked people back to their car.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And part of that is you're going to see their car, right? You're going to see how clean do they keep their car, which I always thought that's interesting. Once when I was being recruited for a church, and this was for a fairly senior role, I thought, wow, this is a smart move. What they said was like, we got to what would be the first weekend stage, right? Like, hey, why don't you come? And they said, hey, we'd like to do that, but actually before we do that, we actually want to fly our senior pastor. I'd be working for the senior pastor. We'd love to fly our senior pastor to come spend a day with you in your current context. Yeah. Just kind of being a fly on the wall. And I was like, wow, that's a great move. And obviously we had to come up with a reason for that, and it was fine. But it got us into a different, actually I didn't end up going there, but ended up friends with that guy, and we're still like, we're on the every 6-month plan, kind of check in, how's it going? Because they took a relational tone, and I thought it was a smart move because they were like trying to investigate really our whole context, trying to understand, because it's one thing to see it on paper. It's another thing to listen to someone talk about it. It's a whole different thing to show up to the ministry and actually see it in action. So interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Here's what you don't do though.
Sure.
Okay? Let's be clear on this one. Don't pile into the church van with 15 people.
Right.
And show up on Sunday morning, and I hate that I have to say that.
Yeah, I was saying, you've heard everything. This is the problem with your line of work. You've heard everything.
Yeah. So if you're going to do it, learn subtlety, understand that, I'm a friend from out of town or whatever.
Yes.
Because here's the deal. And this is something that we all need to kind of keep in mind with going through this process. For a lot of people, the minute that the word gets out that they might be looking or they might be being scouted, they're going to be handed a box. We don't like to think that that's how it works in the church.
Yeah.
But a lot of times that's how it happens. I know stories of people that said, "Hey, I'd like to finish out the school year. I'm going to give you 90 days." And they're like, "Hey, that's great. We're going to give you 3. Pack your office. Let's go." And so
totally
keep that in mind. But I mean, that's awesome if you can do it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could see that. And there is like we want to treat people with total respect and dignity on their end. They, I've had and I'm not even in the headhunting business. And I feel like literally just last night, I had one of these calls with a friend, acquaintance who is, wrestling with what they're thinking about doing next. And I was trying to encourage them. I'm like, listen, they brought it up. I didn't bring it up. They brought up that, well, I'm thinking about maybe doing something different. And I'm like, listen, I think there's 100 churches that would hire you tomorrow. But you want to handle that, delicately. So a few more people have entering questions. I got a couple more I'd love to kick around. So it would not be 2021 without asking about the pandemic. How has the pandemic, I know it hasn't happened in Orlando. There's no COVID in Orlando. Everything is fine there. But in the rest of the country, I'm sure it's had some impact on your hiring process. How has that impacted churches' hiring processes?
Not at all. No, it's been impressive, or it's been it's been wild. We'll just put it that way. What we saw was the second and third quarters of 2020. It was just dead. It was crickets, right? We saw everybody just kind of either push pause on the searches that they had going on, or just hold up. Now, at the end of August, we started to see, just the pent up demand, and what we saw was just people getting tired. Senior pastors that are tired of leading lock-ins because they've been looking for a youth pastor for however long, just needing help. And it's just like, hey, we got to do something. And so it started to go. And then now we're seeing churches really scale up. The traditional hiring season in the church world starts somewhere around Martin Luther King weekend and goes until June. And
that's good to know.
We're seeing that hit in earnest right now. That's one thing. Second thing that we're seeing is candidates are skittish. I think that's a technical word. But there's a lot of people that are really concerned about being the last in and the first out.
Oh, true. Of course. Yeah, that makes sense.
Working through this with somebody, you've got to be able to speak to those fears. And
that's good.
Have them ready to go. We're seeing, and this shouldn't be a surprise, but we're seeing a rise in the wave of tech people, communications people, online campus pastor roles. But the other thing that we're seeing, and this is, in some ways, this is heartbreaking. In some ways, I think this is going to be a good thing for the kingdom. We're seeing a ton of the 3 weeks leading up to Christmas. So more lead pastor resumes come in those 3 weeks than we did in the 6 months previous combined.
Oh, wow.
If
that's an interesting leading indicator. That's a leading indicator.
It's a leading indicator. And Christmas, people are busy, right?
Yes.
Pastors have one or two things, and this is all lead pastor roles. We're going to see a pretty significant reshuffling of the deck this year. And
that's so interesting you say that, because actually Dave is on this call. We were texting before Christmas, Dave Miller, a friend of mine. And we were texting he comes from the kind of worship space, and he's a great leader. And we were texting before Christmas, and he said, I suspect, I thought that's a really keen insight. He said, I suspect this is like the hardest year to be a senior pastor because of all the pressure, the COVID stuff, everything that's gone on. He's like, it's the easiest year to be a programming person. He didn't actually say it that way. He was gentler about that. It's like, it was the easiest year to do that because there wasn't nobody was doing the big Bring the Camels on Stage Christmas event this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I've seen that as well. So the same to reinforce there is, in fact, I just spoke at a conference last week, and this was exactly my topic, was how we got to get ready for this wave of succession that's coming for sure. Interesting.
Yeah. It's going to be a fascinating year. We're seeing a lot of accelerated succession planning. We're seeing a lot of people leave ministry altogether. And we're seeing a lot of people that are just tired of being wrong in their current context. Regardless of the decision they make, they're always wrong. But yeah, it's going to be a fascinating year to see how this all plays out.
Cool. Well, we're going to jump into some questions. I want you to stick around. We've got a great resource, friends, that you're going to want to be a part of. And there's actually two amazing things that are going to happen at the end. So you're going to want to stick at least for another 10-ish so minutes or not. So Dan asked a question. This is a question about non-pastoral roles. He said, for a church of less than 100 in attendance, what recommendations do you have about job posting? Indeed, systems like that. I've got some of our personnel team with a reluctance to spend money there. So I'm assuming that's like a volunteer group that's kind of, they don't want to spend money on that sort of thing. What are your recommendations on that front?
Okay. So here's how I tell you to do it, right? First thing is start looking internal. I'm going to assume that you did that. Somebody that gets your church, loves your church, it's not going to be a big cultural shift. If that doesn't happen, then the next place to go is to start reaching out to people in your immediate network, other churches. Who do you know that could be a good fit for something like this for us? And it's a non-ministry, so we'll say it's like, an admin or something like that. Start to investigate people that know your church, love your church, don't go to your church, start to work those resources. Next one is, and then probably for this role, whether it's a full-time or part-time, you're probably not going to relocate somebody from across the country. So Indeed is a decent place. It's, for ministry roles, we've actually done a lot on Indeed. We see some. It really surprised me. I turned my nose, up to it.
I would naturally not lean that way, but that's interesting.
Yeah, but for like a non-pastoral role, that's a good place to go.
Starting point.
But you just want to discern through it. Are they looking for a job, especially in Indeed, because it's not like a church focused site.
Right.
You're going to want to make sure that they still have a ministry mindset, regardless of whether this is a pastoral role or not.
Yeah, and you're going to want to be clear. Again, we're not offering you any legal advice, but you're going to want to be clear in the posting what you're doing and all of that, and checking your local, jurisdiction around those. That's in a general statement about hiring in general, but specifically that issue. This is maybe a follow up on that from Malia. So she said, "What's the process for hiring someone who's already internal? So what should we be thinking about? Maybe moving a current volunteer who's maybe volunteering in an area, kind of pulling them on staff. What should we be thinking about with those kind of transactions?"
That's awesome. If you can do that, I wish that more churches had the leadership pipeline enough to be able to do this. That would put us out of business, but I think that'd make for healthier churches, and I'd love that. Right?
Sure.
So that's awesome. Good job on you guys. Here's the thing, and as you go through this process, they're going to need to be able to start to think through what does this make, how does this change my relationship with the church, with the teams I'm on, that kind of thing. This is where an outside set of eyes is going to be helpful. And I'm not shilling for us, I promise. This is where you lean into some of the church network friends that you have and say, hey, would you mind having a conversation with this person, poke and prod, make sure that they're going to get some of the special, special joys that come with ministry. Make sure that somebody's talking with them about knowing, what happens, how the sausage gets made, right?
Yes.
A lot of times we have this, we're just going to sit around the office and sing Jesus all the time.
Yes, exactly. Lots of prayer times.
Yeah. Haven't been there. So get some outside set of eyes. We'll do that with some churches, but get somebody that gets ministry to walk through and make sure that they're, just to give you some red, yellow, and green flags. And make sure that, you guys know fully what you're getting into.
Yeah, that's good. And Malia, in other contexts, I've talked about the internal, external hiring thing, that internal hires are particularly good when you want to sustain and propel the existing culture, the existing system. So if it's like something's working and you want to keep it working, hiring somebody internally can be really good for that. External is particularly good when you want to change a system, improve it, take new ground. And so if it's an area where you're hoping to take new ground, I would put a flag on maybe you need to be thinking about an external hire rather than an internal hire. And that oftentimes when we're hiring people, that is by definition what we're hoping. We're the reason why we're paying money here is because we want this area to improve, which does tend to lean towards an external hire. Not saying, listen, I totally agree with Matt. If we could all hire internally, that would be amazing. But we just need to think about that for sure. So it sounds like that connected with her. Devereaux asked a question. Do you see a value in personality assessments, MBTI, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, any of those kinds of assessments? How do you use them? How do they fit into your process?
Yeah, so we built our own assessment process just because I wanted to be able to say that we're proprietary a lot. So we built ours. We see incredible value in that. Now, the reason we don't use a name brand is because we think every church, needs to have the one that they use, whether it's Myers-Briggs, whether it's Enneagram, whether it's whatever the flavor of the month is this week. You need to have one. Now, here's the thing, and this is what I really kind of push on churches with. Do not use a profile to be an excluder. Okay. Just because somebody is an ENFP does not mean that they're not cut out to be an executive pastor or a or whatever. Because they're a 7 doesn't mean that they're not cut out for this role.
Right.
Where you want to use these is to kind of help understand, the general wiring of somebody and to be able to have some self-awareness conversations, right? So how much do you know of yourself and how you need to staff around some of your unique giftings, but also some of the, the unique weaknesses that you kind of bring to the table based on how you're wired. So don't go and say, I need an ID only for a youth pastor, but have the conversation. Okay, you're an ID. This is what we think we know about you. Help us understand.
Yeah, fill that in.
Fill that in. The other thing is,
that's good insight.
Just because you're going into a hiring process, don't think that you need to use a personality profile. If you are not already using a personality profile in your church, and you are not using a common language around this,
so true.
It's not going to help.
Now is not the time to start.
Now's not the time to start. Let them get in, let them get situated, and then you all figure out, what makes the most sense and build that into your culture. But don't, we need a new lead pastor. We should use the Enneagram. Well, maybe, but
that's a very good insight.
Don't try to learn that on the fly.
Yeah, those tools are better. Any of those I found can be really helpful for all the people that are already there to help understand how to interact with each other, to, like you say, to provide a touchstone for conversation.
Yeah.
But if you're not having those conversations now, it can just be disorienting because it's like, I'm not sure what this means.
Yeah.
So Jeremy asked a question, this is a good question. Our church is trying to find a hiring strategy for future growth. Typical hires are worship leader, youth pastor, etc. Do you have any recommendations for a strategy around staff hirings? I'm assuming the kind of underlying there is, are there certain roles that help drive the growth of the church that, we see typically are maybe a leading indicator of like, hey, churches are making these hires to help make their, help their churches move forward. What do you see on that front?
Okay, this is total consultant answer. It depends.
Dude. Yes, sure. Yes.
More of this. So one of the things I'll do, I also do strat op with churches. I help them kind of develop a strategic plan. And one of the things that I'm always, repeating is, don't just hire, the common trend was always, you need to hire a kids pastor because that's going to be a growth engine. Yep. And it very well may be the case.
Right.
But it may not be the case in your unique, version of the local church. And so part of this is, what's going to make sense for your target demographic, what's going to make the most sense for the unique culture of the area that you've been placed in, what's going to make the most sense for where you're going as a team. And so, Jeremy, I'm happy to have more of a conversation to kind of learn a little bit more about your church.
Flesh that out a bit more.
And flesh that out. But, the more, 20 years ago, I had all the answers,
Sure. Yeah.
And the more I've got seasoned, it's more,
more gray hair.
It's case by case. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good answer. That's totally a similar thing I would say. There is some I was actually going to say the stereotypical thing that you said, which is there is some evidence that, if you're choosing between kids and youth, I would generally pick kids over youth.
Yeah.
As a growth engine. Kids ministry will generally draw people to the church. Youth ministry generally sustains people at the church.
Right.
And there's a couple of those kind of rules of thumb, but like you say, you really do need to dig in. Actually, that is probably a good segue. One of the things, Matt, I just put a link in the chat. One of the things that Matt has done, which is crazy, is he said he would be willing to get on a 30-minute call with anybody that's on this thing today. This is amazing. This is a gift to you. So what you want to do is click on that link, and it'll literally just take you in, and you can schedule a time, jump on a phone. And actually, that's a great question to jump into. Get Jeremy, you can give him a bit of a kind of sense of your church, and then he can give you a bit more information about that. Obviously, if you're thinking about hiring, I'm assuming you are, why you've invested 45 minutes, you should definitely click that link and listen to Matt talk through, particularly the services they offer. You will, so this is a long-term hire. You're trying to hire someone over 3.5 years. We're hoping for 5+ years. The investment that you will make financially and in the process is worth it for this hire. You should be using chemistry to help you do all of your hiring, and they do a great job. They'd be willing to help you, and so you definitely need to be booking that. So that's one link, and then the other link, and don't go anywhere, friends. We still got another question. We're sharing this tool, which is a restructuring playbook. We've been talking about this at Unseminary. In our kind of monthly ad spots. This is an incredible tool, and you get it here. You don't have to give your email or anything. You just click it and download it. It's sharing now in the chat. It's a tool to help you think through kind of what does your staff look like next. Matt, give us the kind of 30 seconds understanding that tool, the restructuring playbook. Why did you design it? Why are you giving it away? Give us a sense of that.
Yeah. So I mean, over the last year,
yes.
So many churches are figuring, oh no, what was working in February no longer works, right? And so we had a lot of conversations with people about, okay, so based on what we know about where ministry is headed, how do we need to adjust our staffing? How do we need to adjust our programming? How do we need to adjust, just church?
Sure.
And everybody kind of instinctively knows that things got to change.
Yep.
But so many times we just don't know where to start. And, they didn't teach me that in seminary, which, somebody.
Nice. Nice. Appreciate that.
But, they didn't teach us that. Most churches have struggled. I mean, churches struggle with change, right?
Yes. Yes.
So what we wanted to do was just kind of give a process, here's how to begin having the conversations around, it changed. And in there, it's not going to give you the answers. It's not going to say, oh, you need to do an online campus. It's not going to say that. It's going to say, looking at your local church, what's working right now? What's not working? What's confused about what we're doing? What do we need to be looking towards in the future? And so it's kind of a guide to walk you through a process. And you can do this with yourself. You can do this with your team. And we really wanted to make it accessible for churches.
Yeah,
it's one of those things that we're all wrestling with, and we just don't feel equipped to be able to lean into.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like it is an amazing tool. I know we were joking about this off the top, but it is and I maybe generate these, like, here's a 3-page PDF on something that hopefully will help your team, but this isn't that. It's like a ton of pages. It really walks you through step by step. You actually fill stuff right in. It's a great tool. You should pick it up. It's downloadable there. Well, just a couple last questions before we go as we finish off here in the last few minutes. When you think about the future, kind of look up over the horizon, where do you think kind of this aspect of church leadership is going? What are some things we should be thinking about as we look to the future?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One of the things that I think has been helpful for the church about COVID is I think there's been a reminder that we need to get back to basics and tackle pastoring. The churches that have done really well in this season have realized that, we're not going to be on stage as much anymore. The platform ministries, just by necessity, aren't going to take the high priority. And so we need to get back into this idea of, calling people, checking in. I still get, I went to Bayside Church out in the Sacramento area right? Twice. I think the most recent time was 3 years ago.
Right.
They're still blowing my phone up saying, hey, do you need toilet paper? How can we
pray? Right. Amazing.
How cool is that? So getting back into some of those pastoral giftings of caring for people and doing the high touch ministry is going to be really good. Also kind of becoming more equippers than doers. Sometimes we get siloed.
Ephesians 4, man.
Well, right.
Shocker. Yes.
I think we're also going to see a slim down, more agile ministry structure. I hope we do. I love Tony Morgan's, 1 to 100. I think that there's some real power in that. I hope that that's where we go, but I think I hope it's more philosophically based than it is dollars based. But I'm hoping that that's where we see things go. So
yeah, it's interesting. I was on a call recently with a church leader, and they were asking about volunteer engagement, and they described, so they're a church of about 350 people with 6 full-time staff, and they were saying they were struggling with volunteer engagement. They were like, we're having, how do we, and so, I gave them a couple different ideas, and then I went there and I said, like, hey, like, it could be that you have too many staff, that you have too many people, and they're actually taking, they're taking opportunity away from people. And I do think, particularly on that slim down staff thing, I see that. And I think the definition of what is an organization is shifting. There's more opportunities for part-time work or remote work or those kinds of things that maybe you end up spending the same money, but it looks a little bit different, is interesting. Well, let's wrap up with this last question. Tell us about chemistry staffing. We've kept you for almost an hour and you haven't pitched us once. What sort of churches really work best with you and that would connect with you? Who are the people that really should reach out and talk to you today?
Yeah. So, anybody? No.
Yeah, exactly.
So here's why we built this. We wanted to serve the small, mid-sized churches. Now we've worked with churches of 40. We've worked with churches of 8,000, right? So our process works and it scales really well. But where I saw the need, and you've probably seen this too, where I saw the need for help here was in that small and mid-sized church. So we work with a ton of churches that thought that they either couldn't afford help or just don't even know where to start. And so if you're looking for in role wise, we're pretty broad. There's 30 of us on our team. We've got from all different areas ministry wise. And so really, if you are looking for somebody to join your team, and we'd love to have that conversation.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Well, Matt, I really appreciate your the work you do. And friends, thanks so much for being on this webinar today. It's an honor that you would take some time out. We're, here at Unseminary, we like to say our motto is always helping church leaders. Today has been so great, Matt. You have given us so much insight, so much help. I really appreciate that. You've helped us think through it. Like I said, I've got a page of notes here for me to be thinking about other hiring. So I appreciate that. So thanks so much, friends. I would encourage you as we wrap, please book that 30-minute call with Matt. Let's blow up his phone and make him regret his friendship with me. But seriously, he'd love to help. Him and the team would love. They're super helpful guys. Would love to help you as you think through your problems. So, and how we can really place the best people on your team. Thanks so much, friends. We'll talk to you later. Have a great day.
Thanks, y'all.